Treasure. Please join me in welcoming the one, the only Walter Koenig. Come on, show some love. Very good, guys. Good job. Good job. Don't be so far away from me. Get closer to me. You want to... That's really good. I love this guy. We are about to celebrate our 40th anniversary together. Can you freaking believe it? It's been 40 years. 1979 was our first show together.
And I was your first guest.
Yeah, you were my first Star Trek guest, that's right, I know. I was a Star Trek virgin until I met you. First of all, I really mean it, you look great. You look great.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah. So, there's so much to talk about. I want to leave a lot of time for audience questions, but for those that haven't kind of heard some of this, first of all, let's go back and talk a little bit about your childhood and your parents. I'm kind of fascinated with their lineage, their genealogy, and that whole immigrant's tale.
Yeah, it's really curious that you pose that question. I'm serious because I just finished writing a piece for a new book. It's going to be an anthology, and the overriding theme of the book is immigration, and they're accepting pieces by playwrights, comedians, people who may have some recognition with the public. And I sent them a piece about what we went through beginning in my father and mother were both Russian. My dad was tried and true communist. He was, to his core, he was a communist.
Well, what year did he get over here?
He came over in 1912. He was
So he got over just before the revolution, is that right?
Yeah.
Like so many Russian Jews did, right?
Yeah.
They got out just before.
And he was looking for a belief system that he could be passionate about. And Marxism really sounded great. And, it was talking about for the people and treating people all people with respect. And he was very outspoken.
Then why not stay? Why would he leave then?
Because it was before the revolution. It was just before the revolution.
He didn't know that it was coming.
No, I guess not. And it was very difficult for Jewish Russian. In any case, the point is, and the interesting reason that you bring it up is, so I wrote a book that really had its germination in 1948, when the HUAC, the House of American Activities Committee, began investigating screenwriters in Hollywood and finding all sorts of commies among the screenwriters. And these people, many of them had been communists, and they had joined the party in the 30s. And they had this idealistic, what am I trying to say? Yeah, that's the word. Idealistic, yes. Feeling about how people could live together better and form more perfect unions. And then they, when it sort of went out of vogue and they went around the rest of their lives doing whatever they did, they were not overthrowing the government. They were not making propaganda films that meant to express that communism was the future. Forget about it. That was the House of American Activities Committee one of whose main members went to jail, you know, for some white-collar crime. And at that point, 1948, I opened the mailbox, I was 12 years old, and looking for a Lone Ranger 6-shooter ring that I was expecting. That was a premium that I had been looking forward to. And instead of that, what I found was a crumpled piece of paper with 4 words on it saying, "Shit commies, get out." Not funny, scary. By 1950, Joe McCarthy, the senator from Wisconsin, who was looking for the evil commies in the State Department and never proved any of them was true, but thrived and built his reputation on being this witch hunter. He was very prominently on the scene, and America was scared and intimidated. And we were all looking at each other, wondering who was the red enforcer, the red spy among us. There was a wonderful play called The Crucible, written by Arthur Miller, about a witch hunter. And he was inspired by what was transpiring in our country. You know, I say this, at the same time, I emphatically state that problems like this, and I'm not going to preach about the current administration because you didn't pay to hear my political views, but I have a service to myself to say that I need to express. We've got to do better than we have now. And the problems like this happen everywhere. There is no country, there's no culture, there's no society that hasn't suffered from periods of inhumanity when they have not treated each other with the respect that we all deserve. So, having said that, let's talk about some other funny things.
Well, I wanted to kind of delve into the dichotomy of your career between your polarity towards being an actor and being a writer. It seems as if you sort of had both of those. I'm not sure if they're at odds with each other, but they certainly have been two things that have drawn you throughout your life. Where did you first develop an interest in writing?
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. Thank you. Well, some of it came out of desperation. Star Trek was canceled in 1969. Gene Roddenberry called us all and said, "It's been a pleasure working with everybody, and I hope we can do it again someday." And that was it. Okay, that's the end of Star Trek. Now what? I don't hear any phones ringing. Nobody is asking to employ my talent. Do I have any talent? Was it all a mistake? You know, you start to descend. The moralization sets in. And you really question yourself and wonder, you know, if you're not working, do you have an identity? I mean, identity is linked with character and personality, and work is linked to that. You need to have something that describes your life. At least that's certainly the way I felt. And suddenly I was living in a vacuum. I had a baby at home, was crying. I had no reason to get up in the morning. My agents, it was as if they didn't exist, or as if I didn't exist. There were no opportunities for me. And one morning I finally said, "I'm so depressed, I don't know why I would want to get up today." And I looked at the flaking ceilings. We lived in a low-rent apartment, and I said, I have to have an objective. I made a very conscious statement to myself. I have to have something that I can look forward to doing every day, and that gives me a reason to get up, gives me a reason to exist. So I started writing a novel, and I didn't outline it. I didn't do any of the things you're supposed to do as a novelist. But I did it every day. And every day, if I wrote a sentence or if I wrote a page, I felt that I had done something to make me feel better about myself. And it went on, and I got to the point after about 4 or 5 months of writing, I said, my God, I better sell this. I've put in so much time. But when I got done with it, I said to myself, you know, that wasn't the important thing, selling it. The important thing was doing it. The important thing was, you know, making myself feel that I had accomplished something. That, you know, that I had less ambivalence about my own existence. I just felt good for the process of writing. I showed it to 4 writers. George Clayton Johnson, if you know Star Trek, you know George Clayton. He also co-wrote the movie, oh God, come on, Walter. The movie about, you start going old at 30 and Logan's Run, thank you. And I showed it to another writer who had a couple of plays on Broadway, and he wrote for Star Trek as well, and I can't think of his name right now. But I also showed it to Harlan Ellison. Now, if you know Harlan, or you know of Harlan, you know what an extraordinary talent he was. He just recently passed away, by the way.
Well, in fact, this whole weekend is partly dedicated to Harlan Ellison. He was a great man.
That's good. On the other hand, he hated my novel. He just hated it. He kept talking about precision. There's no precision in your novel. So, you know, as much respect as I had for him, I put it in the drawer, and I left it there. And I said, well, that's okay, because I did it, and I've accomplished what I really needed to accomplish, and that was to write it. 18 years later, somebody asked me about it, I showed it to them, they showed it to somebody else, and it was published. It was not self-published, it was published. 18 years, I swear this is my hand to God. Another 18 years went by, somebody else, another young publisher, saw it and published it again. So that's twice it's been published. About 2.5, 3 years after that, another young publisher read it. Well, it was recommended to him by one of his editors, and they published it the 3rd time. So I probably hold the record for the most times a book is published with circulation that was probably less than 200 altogether.
I'm sure Harlan would have been proud of you, though.
Yeah.
After all that.
Yeah.
Is it true that you wrote for the animated Star Trek?
I wrote for the animated Star Trek.
Yeah, you did. Which episode?
I wrote an episode called The Infinite Vulcan. Gene read it. Well, thank you. Gene read the script that I'd written. Well, he read it because Susan Sackett, who was the secretary, I paid her to print it up. You know, this was the days when we only had typing machines. What about that?
Was it IBM Selectric, or was it before that?
No, it was before that.
It's just regular typewriter.
Yeah, so I had, you know, the whiteout and the dictionary, you know, always at hand. So she, typewriter. I paid her to type it up professionally. And she told Gene about it, and he read it, and he offered me an opportunity to write for the animated Star Trek. That was flattering until I started writing it, and then I wasn't all that happy with the situation. I mean, I came up with this idea about a force, a security force that was policing the galaxy, and they were all clones of Mr. Spock. And at the time, it seemed like a good idea.
It's a good idea.
Cloning was very popular at the time, 1979. I know we've had a siege of it, and it's in the news, but at that juncture, it was also something people were talking about. But Gene said to me, well, you know, this is animation. We can do lots of things that we couldn't do with human beings. So we started introducing talking vegetables and stuff that I really wasn't that crazy about. And again, I thought, something that I thought was unique to my experience writing for him was that he had me do rewrites. Rewrites ad nauseum. I mean, one after another after another.
Was that typical Roddenberry MO?
That's what I found out after the fact. Because I read this wonderful trilogy, these 3 volumes called These Are the Voyages. And if you haven't read them, it's about Star Trek behind the scenes, the 3 years of our series. And if that is kind of interesting to you, you see all the mimeographed memos from producers to writers to directors to cast. It's absolutely fascinating. Mark Chapman is the gentleman's name, I think. In any case, that's when I found out that Gene had a propensity for rewrites, and actually was sort of determined that regardless of how many writers were on the project, he got to write the last draft. That's went on through our series, all three seasons, and I think at the beginning of Next Generation.
You might be the only Star Trek actor, or certainly the only classic cast actor that had the distinction of both acting and writing for Roddenberry. Is that possible?
I don't know. I don't think
it's a distinction.
Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess. We had really terrific writers on the show. We had some
great writers on the show.
Extraordinary talent.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I mentioned this to a small group that I spoke with this morning. I think what's transpired, it's not that the writers that are doing Star Trek today, I'm talking about the feature films, are not talented or invented. But Star Trek has changed to the degree where the visual impulse or the visual effect of Star Trek has become at least as important, if not considerably more important, than story content. And as a consequence, the writers today are thinking about, now how is this going to look in CGI? And that means the perspective has changed on what we're trying to do with Star Trek. The stories are not as profound in terms of concept, story idea. They are more. They are trying to appeal to a broader audience.
Have you watched Discovery? Have you seen?
No, I can't talk about Discovery.
I'm going to tell you what. I think that Discovery, the showrunners of Discovery, are major creative talents in the sense that I think they're very concerned with bringing back important character development.
That's great.
Story development, and I think that we're all loving it. I mean, I love Discovery. I just think it's fantastic. So you should sample it, because I think you'll be very pleasant as a writer. I think you'll be very, very pleasantly pleased by the fact that they're taking that into consideration very much. I think story is first and forward in their minds.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. And truly, it's not that I'm disparaging the movies. I've enjoyed the movies. I found them entertaining. I like the first one and the third one most, because I think they, particularly in the third one, they really made an effort to start to develop character more. There were a lot of, two character scenes and things like that.
We're going to talk a little bit about acting now. First of all, you've dabbled in the stage. I had the pleasure of seeing you and Mark Leonard do The Boys of Autumn, which I don't know if anybody out there ever got to see them do it, but it really was actually a pretty remarkable work. Just tell us a little bit about your stage work and what you've done, as well as what you enjoyed about it, or what the challenges of it were.
Well, I cut my teeth with theater. That's where I started, and I think that's once you've done theater, and if you've done it successfully, and you've learned technique, and you've learned how to examine who you are and how you can bring it to the character you're playing, then film is easier. I think it's harder transitioning from film to theater than it is from theater to film. Obviously, I think you have a better foundation if you've done theater. So I never abandoned that. I never gave it up. I worked in Little Theater in Los Angeles for years and years, different small theaters doing different plays, and always enjoyed that experience.
You in something called Neighborhood Playhouse?
Neighborhood Playhouse was my drama school. That's I graduated from UCLA and with a BA in psychology, and even while I was positioning to obtain that degree, I knew that this was something that I was going to dislike doing least, and not really a testimonial for a career choice. So, but I took one acting course at UCLA. I had a teacher who had considerable faith in me, and recommended that I go back to drama school, that he was the representative for on the West Coast. In my class, by the way, class of 70. Well, it may not be as impressive to you as it might be to an audience with people who are 50 years old and older. I doubt it. That group is in the majority here. But in my class was James Caan, Christopher Lloyd, Dabney Coleman, and three actresses who became movie stars: Jessica Walter, Brenda Carlo, and Elizabeth Ashley. That's an
That's impressive. Wow. It's impressive, and so do you, as a creative group, get to kind of riff off of each other and sort of grow off of each other?
Well, I don't know. It was a very stimulating atmosphere. I was very, very close to Chris. Christopher and I were great friends. He thought I was funny, and we got along great. We actually worked in the same movie together. We worked in Star Trek 3. Who's the bad Klingon in 3? I think so. But I didn't have seen him. James Caan, who was Godfather and all those other movies he made, we did a Harlan Ellison script for the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. And Jimmy Caan played Harlan, which is a stretch, and he was the good kid, and I was the leader of the gang, and I was the bad kid. And it was great fun. I got we had a kangaroo court, and he was on trial, he being Harlan / Jimmy Caan. And at one point, I'm supposed to whack him across the face. I did this hand. I know I did it with this hand because I was wearing this ring, and I split his lip. Yeah, and I was aghast. The shot was over my shoulder on him, and I was aghast, and I wanted to stop. And I could see in his eyes, he didn't want me to stop. He loved it. He loved the idea of the blood dripping down his lip. So we went on, and there was no hard feelings. I just came too close. That's what it was. But that was a fun experience.
All right, talk to us about Chekov. You've lived in Chekov's skin for 51 years, something like that, 52 years, 51 years. Now looking back on it after all this time, you do feel more benign about the character and your role in the whole saga. I know there were some years where you felt frustrated over the character development or the lack thereof that you felt, but I think history's been very kind to the character, clearly to your performances. We adore you. When we go back and we watch you, we love what we see. We love what you do. So I would hope that at the very least would be more benign and happy and self-assured in the work that you did, if not the way in which the character was developed to your satisfaction.
My problem, Adam, was always not the character. I loved the character. My problem was the public. Now, before you get up and start throwing things at me, let me explain it. The fans. My problem was, I haven't done anything worth all this approbation.
Yes, you have.
Oh, see, that's the problem. I never felt that I did. I thought, I had as big an ego as anybody, and I felt I could do more, and I could bring more to the role. And the opportunity wasn't there. It wasn't there conspiratorially. It wasn't there in any kind of a way that I could interpret as anti-Walter or that anybody was out to get me. It was just that we had three actors, three characters that dominated, and that's the way the series was conceived, and that's the way it was destined to move on. And I just felt it really bothered me initially, particularly when I started going to conventions before we came back as movies, and we were still living off the laurels of reruns, and people would, literally get up and cheer, and I'm saying, but I didn't do anything, and this is embarrassing. It was truly, I felt uncomfortable with that. When we started making the movies, I thought, okay, I can accept this to some degree now. So it was never that I didn't like playing the character. I just wanted the character to be more nuanced and have more to do and let the audience in on who he was.
I thought you had a great time in Star Trek 4. I mean, Voyage Home.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Fantastic.
No, that was fun. I had a really fun time. There were obviously exceptions, and I didn't, and being involved with this for 53 years. I mean, certainly there are the drawbacks, but what an extraordinary piece of luck that was, that I've been able to go on and provide for a family and have other opportunities as a consequence of my involvement in Star Trek and do other things. So yeah, it's amazing. I still feel a little antsy about people telling me how much they loved me on Star Trek. Give me a break. Warp Factor 3? How much can you love Warp Factor 3? that was pretty much it. But Babylon 5 came out of Star Trek. Yeah, and Dave Iris was a fan. The creator of Babylon was a fan of Star Trek, and saw the potential, if not the realization of ability. We saw the potential for ability in my performance, and cast me in a very challenging and adventuresome role. I had a great time playing Bessie. So I got lots and lots of stuff to be gratified and grateful for having to do with Star Trek. There's no question about it. No question about it. But, like probably every other actor, if you would admit it, in your head you think you could be something extraordinary, whether it's true or not. Maybe it's a good thing I was never really tested, because I found out that I couldn't. But in your head you keep thinking, yeah, I could really have done something, or I see this role being played, and man, I know that I could have done things with this role. I came very close to, and this is either you approve of this or you don't. I came very close to playing Charles Manson. In Helter Skelter. They couldn't find another actor in Los Angeles. They found me, and I read for it, and I blew the director away. He just thought it was extraordinary. He says, don't do anything, you're the only person we've found, and I want you for this. Unfortunately, there was another coast, and India Kazan was on the other coast, and he just worked with the young man who they ultimately cast. And he recommended him. He was terrific. That was, the saving grace for me was that he was really, really good. It would have been painful if he wasn't a good actor.
I mean, it's a shame because when we think of you, we think of Charles Manson. It's
yeah, of course.
it's such a natural.
I know. That's
we have to go to questions, but before we do, I just want to take a nod at Anton Yeltsin, who I felt kind of captured the essence of the character in a beautiful way that was also an homage to you. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, my thoughts, I got to talk to him for about 2 hours. I was invited, JJ invited me to the set during the shooting of the first film, and he came in early, Anton did, and we sat and talked for a couple of hours. What I discovered was an extremely bright young man, very personable, and very talented. And well, you know that had Star Trek not been in his life, he still would have been an extraordinary young actor with an enormously successful career. So it was a tragedy first losing the person. It was a great tragedy losing the person. I met his parents. They were from Russia, just the way my parents had lived in Russia. Anton went so far as to ignore the imperfections in my accent and played it pretty much the way I did, out of a certain kind of respect, which was quite amazing, I thought, and I was very grateful for that. And a delightful young man. It's just so painful to lose somebody. Of course, I have that personal experience, but I felt that way regarding Anton as well.
Well, the way that he felt about you and your character is the way that we feel about you and your character, which is that we love you. That's all there is to it, okay? So deal with it. Okay, let's take it over to our questions. Let's go over there on the left, your left, Walter.
Hi.
Over there.
Urban observation, but a little question at the end. One of my favorite things about Star Trek V, well, the main story is about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy's friendship, is the friendship between your character and George Takei Sulu. I think if there were web shorts back then, I would have loved to see a buddy comedy of you two alone just getting lost in Yosemite. My question is, what was it like working with George as that pair, that friendship, in the lighter moments in the movies as well-established characters? You get to see a lighter side of them.
I'm sorry. You're asking about Chekov and Sulu's relationship, or Walter and George's?
George working on the comedy side, the lighthearted side of the movies.
Well, that's a stretch. There wasn't that much to do. But we got along okay. We got along well as professional actors working together. I don't want to comment on our personal relationship.
Okay, we'll take it over here. Go over to the other side. There you go. Go.
Hey, Walter. I am your pen pal from Texas. I don't know if you remember me. We had been corresponding for a little while, and you told me about a story that you told in Vegas last year. And you told me that you wouldn't tell me until I was 40, but I'm 21 now, and we're in Vegas. So can you tell me the story?
And what are you asking?
You told me over email about last year. I don't know if you're going to remember, but we had been corresponding over a while via letters, and then we corresponded via email for a little bit.
We corresponded?
Yes.
Tell me your name.
Nina.
Oh, hi.
Nice to meet you.
Well, I'm just trying to make a very definitive statement. I don't want to talk about my relationship with George today.
Oh, no, I'm not asking about that. It was just a risque story you told last year in Vegas. At the convention.
Oh.
In his defense, the acoustics up here are not good. In fact, if we could get more gain on the monitors on the stage, guys, that would be good.
You're not 40 yet.
What is it? It's got to be dirty, right?
I figured I'd try my luck. I think it was about a certain film in the 1970s that you had a particular fondness for.
Oh, you're talking about Star Trek 4?
No. I'm talking about.
Okay, we're going to run out of time here, so let's move on to the next question. If we can't get a quick time is of the essence.
Yes.
Come back. We've lost control of this. Come back up here, Father.
I'm so sorry.
Do you have something to say about this?
Well, you know what happened was that very recently I went over to YouTube. I never go to YouTube, and I looked up my talk at Creation from last year. And there was a reference to a pornographic movie in my talk. And they now have deleted my entire video.
Oh, is in some way that's offensive to YouTube standards? Is that what we're saying? Or?
Yes. So I think we should just go on.
Okay. Let's move on. Hi.
Hello, Walter. Earlier, the two of you mentioned Harlan Ellison, and yes, a little over a month ago, we did lose a great writing legend. He also is known for being somewhat temperamental, occasionally mean, I think. I was wondering how the two of you originally became friends and how you would describe your friendship with Harlan over the decades.
I'm going to sound like such a malcontent by first saying I don't want to talk about George. Harlan, we had a very mercurial relationship. It was up and down, up and down. And my position is that he was the problem, I wasn't. That's my position. Unfortunately, he's not here to talk about it. He was a curmudgeon. You know, we all know that. We all know that he was a brilliant man with an extraordinary intellect and a great literary talent. Whatever it was,
These things go up in the middle.
he felt close to me on the one hand. On the other hand, he felt the need on occasion to be insulting. And I had a hard time dealing with that over the years. I felt like I kept forgiving him. But, you know, I kept in touch. The last year and a half, or the last year he was in bed, he had a stroke and he was paralyzed on one side. And I didn't hang out, but I came to visit him on occasion.
And by the way, Susan and Harlan appreciated it very much, as Susan recounted to me. They appreciated very much your support.
Okay, because the thing is, you know, sometimes I let personal things get in the way, and I don't see the larger picture, you know, as we should. We shouldn't hang on to angry moments and you know, cultivate them and make them worse than they were. So I just had a terrific respect for his talent. And yeah, there were several times when I hung up on him and he'd call me back and I tell him, you know, to do that impossible anatomical act.
When you would have these clashes with him, were they over creative or literary writing concepts, or
Well, no.
what was the fundamental nature of these?
He would just bug up his behind and say something mean, And the thing was that my problem was, and it's my problem, that it took me too long to react to it. You know, I was too knocked back on my heels. And those things need to be said immediately. If you're going to counter an insult, then you should do it at the moment and not be agitated by it, and that it's just kind of...
Would these kinds of insults be the kind of like Don Rickles kinds of insults that are really meant in a kind of an affectionate manner, even if they are sort of brusque?
God, I wish that was so. That would have been terrific.
Okay.
Then he would have been in my heart forever. No, they were just mean. That's all.
Okay. All right, we'll take that. Let's go on. Let's move over there, Walter. Let's keep it going.
Yeah.
So, as someone with an accent, sometimes you encounter people who might stereotype you or react to you a certain way because of how you speak. Thankfully, in my case, mostly positive. But as someone with a fake accent, has anyone ever stereotyped you or reacted to you because of the way you spoke in Star Trek?
It said, what do you do with an accent?
Well, as you know, as an Irishman, I sometimes get people who go, "Oh, you want a drink?" or things like that, or "You've got your pot of gold," or something like that. But as you were putting on a fake Russian accent, like your parents sort of spoke, does someone ever, without meeting you, stereotype you because of the way you spoke in Star Trek?
They did what to me because of what?
Did they stereotype you, or did they
Stereotype.
react to you?
No, never got that. The character wasn't, there was a certain amount of chauvinism in the character, which was supposed to be kind of a running gag. And they took that out in the third season. Gene thought it was sophomoric, and he didn't want it anymore. You know, oh, it was invented by a little old lady in Leningrad. You know, so we stopped doing that. But my mail was exclusively, and I say this without hyperbole, it was exclusively positive and from kids. You know, I was getting mail from, you know, people writing in line paper and pencil, and that was the group that I was supposed to appeal to, and we succeeded in accomplishing that. So it was all about being groovy and liking my hair, whether it was my hair or not. It was not a controversial character. It did not, and public fans never. I don't know what they thought for themselves, but never addressed me in a hostile manner. Particularly since once I did have an experience. What I used to get was people who were in college, and they'd come up to me and say, you know, we're taking Russian in college, and there is no W in the Russian language. You know that, right? So your accent is off. That's true, but you ever hear, there's certain German dialects where the same thing goes on. They say W instead of V. It's something that evidently several different languages from across the globe don't have the W sound. Oh, don't have the, I don't know, they don't have something, and they change one from the other. So the V becomes a W.
In all fairness, you come from Russian lineage, so
Yes.
if you have a certain right, a certain entitlement to speak in Russian the way that you feel you should speak.
And that's the way my father spoke. My father used to say, pass the vegetables, you know. I didn't know if it was Russian or Elmer Fudd, but it was...
All right, great, thank you.
So there's one last situation. So I'm a little jumpy now, a little edgy about the language thing, the accent. And I'm in a convention in New York. I think it was one of yours.
Yeah, blame it on me.
And two young women come to me and said, oh, Mr. Koenig, we love your accent. And I said, okay. Don't like it? That's understandable. It's your choice. I'm committed to what I'm doing. If it's something that you find irritating or uncomfortable, I get it. We don't have to pursue this further. And they're looking at me like I'm a crazy person. And I said, what are you talking about? We're from the Soviet Union.
So there you go. All right, one more. Okay.
All right, Mr. Koenig, you were talking about the HUAC and McCarthy and the whole vibe at that time that you and your parents were experiencing. Did you bring any of the feelings that had to your development of Bester for Babylon 5?
No. It just had, it contributed to my feelings of paranoia. My dad was convinced that we were going to be sent to a camp. I mean, we had, not only did we have Auschwitz and Buchenwald, but we had Manzanar. You know, and that was this country. That was California. So with the communist scare, the Red Scare, that was very much a distinct possibility to my father. And this article that I've written addresses that and the fact that I was tossing books by Howard Fast and by Thomas Paine and for some reason by Jack London. I have no reason. I understand why my father was concerned that Jack London might be considered a subversive, but down the incinerator, and music by the Red Army Choir. I spent every day wondering when the FBI would come to our apartment, because literally they had to everybody else in my apartment building. They had interviewed about us. They had interviewed every other family about us. They never came to us. But our name, I'm sure, is on file. in the FBI. But I was living with that for 6 years, 1948, 1954, wondering when we'd hear the knuckle rap on our door. What happened? Where did he go? Oh my God, I'm all alone.
All right. We ran out of time, but one thing we've concluded is we love you, Walter. Let's hear it for Walter.